The greatest surgeon in the galaxy, a master of nanite technology and cellular regeneration, stepped back from the throne. His 4 spindly arms fell limp, his multifaceted eyes dimming with the shame of failure. Before the assembled lords of 1,000 worlds, he pronounced his verdict: the Emperor is dead. The machines fell silent. A civilization held its breath, braced for the chaos of a fallen dynasty. But in the back of the room, a lone human medic, a man of simple field dressings and outdated pharmacology, saw something they all missed. He saw not a failed machine, but a broken heart, and he was about to risk an interstellar incident by doing the one thing no one else had thought of: reaching out and taking the Emperor's hand. The grand chamber of spires on the apex of the imperial citadel of Cathar Prime was a testament to 100 millennia of dominance. Its crystalline walls shimmered with captured starlight, and the air itself hummed with the subtle energies of a civilization that had bent space-time and life to its will. But today the hum was a dirge. The light was a cold, clinical glare. At the center of it all, upon the throne of whispering gypsum, lay Emperor Kalen, the Unifier. He was not a king of myth, but a being of immense power, his body interwoven with the living technology of his people. Encasing his chest was the Life Stone, a symbiotic crystalline organism that served as his second heart, his data codex, and the source of the bioenergetic field that stabilized his rule. And it was failing. Flickering holographic displays cast a sickly blue light upon the scene. They were projected from a Viridian med suite, the pinnacle of medical technology, operated by the most renowned surgeon in the galactic concordate, High Physician Xylos of the Vex. Xylos was an artist of the flesh. His people saw biology not as a messy collection of fluids and impulses, but as a perfectible machine. He was tall and slender, a being of polished chitin and delicate 4-fingered hands that could manipulate cellular structures with nanites as easily as a human might thread a needle. For 3 rotations he had worked tirelessly, his swarms of microscopic machines diving into the Emperor's bloodstream, attempting to suture the decaying quantum lattice of the Life Stone. Now he was finished. He retracted his instruments with a series of precise, clicking sounds. The nanite swarms deactivated their faint emerald glow, vanishing from the Emperor's grey-scaled skin. The main biomonitor, which had been displaying a frantic symphony of failing systems, flatlined into a single piercing tone. An aide, a Cathar noble with drooping antennae, silenced it with a trembling claw. In the cavernous chamber, the silence that followed was more deafening than any alarm. "I have failed," Xylos stated. His voice was a series of resonant, dispassionate chimes, devoid of emotion, but heavy with the weight of finality. The cellular decay is irreversible. The Life Stone's core matrix has collapsed. There is a cascade failure in the sympathetic bionetwork. The Emperor is gone. A wave of despair rippled through the assembled Cathar officials. Lord Valerius the Grand Vizier, a towering figure whose ornate robes could not conceal his ambition, stepped forward. His face was a mask of practiced grief. The greatest mind in the Concordate could not save him. Valerius intoned his voice, echoing in the chamber. "We are bereft. The Unifier's light has been extinguished." In the back of the room, standing near the towering entryway, and utterly ignored, was Dr. Aris Kane. He wasn't a diplomat, a noble or a renowned scientist. He was a medic attached to the human diplomatic envoy from the Sol Federation as a glorified chief medical observer. It was a pointless post designed to give humanity a seat at the table without letting them touch anything important. He was a field doctor more accustomed to plasma burns and vacuum exposure on frontier colonies than the rarefied air of an imperial court. His jacket, a standard-issue blue fabric from a company called Stryker Med, looked drab and utilitarian amidst the silken robes and polished armor of the Cathar. Aris had watched the entire procedure not on the grand holographic displays, but on a small, handheld datapad. It was a ruggedized military model, a Panasonic toughpad from centuries ago that he trusted more than any alien tech. It didn't show the fancy 3D models, just raw data, the numbers behind the tragedy. And something about those numbers had been bothering him for hours. Xylos saw a machine breaking down. The Cathar saw a god-king fading. But Aris, the man who had set bones with his bare hands and talked dying soldiers through their last moments, saw something else. He watched as Xylos packed away his tools with meticulous precision, his movements conveying a cold detachment. The Vex surgeon had treated the Emperor like a complex chronometer in need of repair. He'd polished the gears and replaced the springs, but he'd never once checked to see if the damn thing had a soul. The biomonitors were dark. The Vex physician had declared death. The Vizier was already beginning his eulogy, the first step in a well-rehearsed power grab. The story was over. But Aris Kane looked at the data on his ancient tablet, at the faint, almost imperceptible energy signature that still echoed between the Emperor's brain and the Life Stone. It was a pattern he'd seen before, not in a failing organ, but in the brain scans of soldiers suffering from catastrophic psychological trauma. It wasn't just a system failure. It was a feedback loop of despair. The machine wasn't just broken. It was lonely. Aris Kane lowered his datapad. He took a deep breath, the alien air tasting of ozone and sterile filtration. Then, against all protocol, against all common sense, he took a step forward. Wait. The word was quiet, almost lost in the vast, grieving silence of the chamber. It was a human word spoken in Federation standard, yet it cut through the funereal atmosphere like a shard of glass. Every head turned. Dozens of pairs of reptilian Cathar eyes, and the singular multifaceted gaze of High Physician Xylos fixed upon the small, soft-skinned creature in the plain blue jacket. Dr. Aris Kane felt 1,000 years of imperial history pressed down on him. He had just interrupted the Grand Vizier of the Cathar Empire during the eulogy for his fallen sovereign. It was a blunder of such epic proportions that it would likely get the entire human delegation ejected from the system, if not vaporized on the spot. Lord Valerius paused, his expression shifting from sorrow to sheer unadulterated disbelief, then to contempt. "Did the human observer speak?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Aris cleared his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Yes, Your Excellency, I did." He forced himself to walk forward, his worn-out boots seeming impossibly loud on the polished floor. He stopped a respectful distance from the throne, acutely aware of the Praetorian guards, 7-foot-tall warriors clad in obsidian armor, tightening their grip on their plasma glaives. "You have a comment on the proceedings, Doctor." Valerius trailed off, making it clear he neither knew nor cared about the human's name. "Kane. Dr. Aris Kane," he supplied. "And yes, I believe High Physician Xylos is mistaken. The Emperor is not dead." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Xylos, who had been observing with cold curiosity, unfolded his full height. The chitin plates on his back bristled slightly, a Vex sign of extreme agitation. Human Xylos chimed his tone sharp and clinical. "I have monitored every quantum entanglement, every cellular function, every synaptic fire within the Emperor's biology. The Life Stone's energy signature is null. The cerebral cortex shows no high-level activity. His core temperature is falling below the viability threshold. By any and every metric known to medical science, Across 200 worlds the subject has expired. Your statement is not only incorrect, it is offensively ignorant. Aris held up his ancient datapad. With all due respect, High Physician, your metrics are incomplete. You're reading the machine, but you're not reading the ghost in the machine. He tapped the screen, and a simple two-dimensional waveform appeared, a faint, erratic sine wave. This is the residual bioelectric field resonance between the life stone and the Emperor's limbic system. It's faint, barely above background radiation, but it's there. And it's not random noise. It's a repeating pattern. A feedback loop. Xylos gestured dismissively with one of his four hands. Post-mortem neural echoes, trivial phenomena, a string of dying cells firing in sequence. It is meaningless. No, Aris insisted, stepping closer, his voice gaining conviction. It's a distress call. The life stone isn't a power source, it's a symbiote, a partner. It has a consciousness, or something close to it. And as the Emperor's mind began to fail, it began to grieve. Its grief created a harmonic dissonance, which further weakened the Emperor, which in turn amplified the life stone's distress. You've been trying to repair a faulty engine, but the problem isn't mechanical. It's emotional. The absurdity of the claim hung in the air. Emotional. A human. A species known for its irrational, chaotic, and violent tendencies was lecturing a Vex, a being of pure logic about feelings being the cause of a catastrophic biological failure. Lord Valerius let out a short, barking laugh. Emotional distress, Dr. the Lifestone, is a marvel of bioengineering grown and bonded over centuries. It is not some Terran pet that has lost its master. It is an organ. Is it? Oris shot back, looking from the vizier to the still form on the throne. Or is that just how you've chosen to see it? Your entire medical approach is based on fixing components, but what happens when the components are fine, but the system has lost its will to function? This was the core of the human medical philosophy, a lesson learned through centuries of dealing with psychosomatic illnesses, placebo effects, and the undeniable link between mind and body. Health wasn't just the absence of disease, it was a balance, a state of being. To the Vex, this was primitive mysticism. Enough of this fantasy. Xylos interjected his voice, losing its dispassionate edge and taking on a note of true anger. You are wasting our time with pre-scientific nonsense. The Emperor is gone. The sooner the Cathar accept this, the sooner they can begin the rite of succession and ensure the stability of the Empire. Valerius nodded in grim agreement. The physician is right. Guards escort the human doctor back to his delegation's quarters. His observations are no longer required. Two of the Praetorian guards stepped forward, their massive forms eclipsing Aris. This was it. He had tried and failed. He had made a fool of himself and his species. But as the guards reached for him, a new voice spoke. It was deep, gravelly, and commanded an authority that even the Grand Vizier could not ignore. Hold. Commander Vorlag, the captain of the Praetorian Guard and the Emperor's personal protector for 50 years, stepped out from the shadows beside the throne. His armor was unadorned, his face a roadmap of scars from a dozen campaigns. His loyalty was to the Emperor and the Emperor alone. He looked not at Valerius or Xylos, but at Aris. You are certain of this human. You are willing to stake the reputation of your entire species on this feeling. Aris met the old warrior's gaze. I'm willing to stake my life on it, Commander. There is a chance. A slim one, but it is not zero. Vorlag stared at Aris for a long, silent moment, his gaze weighing the human's desperate sincerity against the Vex's cold certainty. He then turned his head to look at the still form of his master, the man he had served his entire life. Perhaps he too saw more than just a body. He turned back to Aris. "What do you propose?" The question silenced the room again. Valerius's face contorted in a brief flash of fury before being replaced by his mask of solemnity. Aris swallowed hard. Now came the hardest part. He had to explain a treatment that involved no nanites, no cellular regeneration, no advanced technology at all. "I can't repair the life stone, not like physician Xylos tried to—" Aris began choosing his words carefully. "That's like trying to fix a broken heart with a screwdriver. The bond between them is failing, because the two halves can no longer hear each other. The Emperor's consciousness is adrift and the life stone is fading in response. I have to re-establish the connection. I have to create a bridge." Xylos made a sound of disgust. "A bridge? What are you talking about? A neural interface, a psionic amplifier. Your species possesses no such technology." "No," Aris said, his gaze fixed on the Emperor. "Nothing like that." He walked past the stunned guards, past the furious vizier, and stopped at the base of the throne. He looked at the Emperor's hand, a powerful three-fingered claw, with grey scales resting limply on the gypsum armrest. "I need to ground him," Aris said, his voice now barely a whisper. "Remind his consciousness of what it's tied to. Remind the life stone that it's not alone." And then, before anyone could react, Dr. Aris Kane, the primitive human medic, reached out and gently took the Emperor's cold, lifeless hand in his own. The act was so simple, so profoundly alien to the rigid protocols of the Cathar court, that it left everyone speechless. A wave of shock, disgust, and disbelief radiated from the assembled nobles. Physical contact with the Emperor by an unbonded, non-Cathar being was a taboo of the highest order. It was a violation. Lord Valerius was the first to find his voice, which was now a strangled roar of fury. "Sacrilege, Commander Vorlag, arrest this blasphemer. He defiles the Unifier's vessel." Commander Vorlag didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the point of contact, the warm, fleshy, five-fingered hand of the human doctor, wrapped around the cold-scaled claw of his Emperor. He saw no violence, no defilement. He saw an act of care. It was a gesture he had not witnessed since he was a hatchling in his spawning pool, comforted by his sire. Xylos, for his part, seemed less offended and more scientifically appalled. "Pointless sentimentality," the Vex surgeon chimed. "The thermal energy transfer from your hand to his is negligible and will have no effect on the subject's core biological processes. You are practicing voodoo, not medicine." Aris ignored them both. His full attention was on the Emperor. He closed his eyes, focusing on the faint sensory information traveling up his arm. The Emperor's skin was cool and dry, like ancient parchment stretched over stone. But beneath that there was something else. A faint, thrumming vibration, a resonance so deep it was felt more than heard. It was the life stone, and it was singing a song of pure, abject misery. "It's worse than I thought," Aris murmured, mostly to himself. "The feedback loop is almost perfectly self-sustaining." He looked up at Xylos, his eyes intense. "Physician, you stated that you detected no high-level cerebral activity. Correct, Xylos confirmed, stiffly. Only basal functions and residual echoes." "What about delta wave activity in the parietal cerebellar region, cross-referenced with the life stone's quantum signature?" Xylos hesitated. His multifaceted eyes blinked slowly. "That is an obscure diagnostic cross-section. The data would be considered noise. Why? Because that's where the bond is anchored." Aris explained, his mind racing connecting dots that only a human with a messy, integrated understanding of consciousness could see. "It's not in the frontal lobe, the seat of logic. It's not in the brain stem, the seat of autonomic function. It's in the part of the brain responsible for spatial awareness, for proprioception, for the innate sense of self. The Emperor doesn't just have a life stone. His brain maps it as a part of his own body like a second heart. When he began to fade, his sense of self began to unravel, and the life stone feeling that amputation began to panic and shut down. Oris gestured to his datapad, which was still displaying the weak, rhythmic waveform. This isn't a death rattle, physician. This is the biological equivalent of a phantom limb. The Emperor's mind is lost in the dark, and his other half is screaming for it, but the screams are just causing more damage. He had no hard proof, no peer-reviewed articles from the Vex Journal of Cellular Mechanics. All he had was a gut feeling, an intuition, born from a species that had spent millennia grappling with the unquantifiable mysteries of its own consciousness. He was a doctor, but in that moment he felt more like a psychologist or even a priest. Commander Vorlag finally spoke his voice, low and rumbling. "Can you fix it?" Aris shook his head. "I can't fix it. Nobody can. That's what Xylos didn't understand. This isn't a problem to be solved. It's a wound to be healed. You can't command a wound to close. You have to create the right conditions for it to heal on its own. The Emperor and the Life Stone have to find their way back to each other. I'm just trying to give them a map. A map made of what hope and good wishes." Valerius sneered, stepping forward. "Commander, I am the Grand Vizier. In the absence of an Emperor, my authority is absolute. I order you again, remove the human. Seize him." Vorlag's massive hand went to the hilt of his plasma glaive, but not to draw it on Aris. He turned his body slightly, placing himself between the Vizier and the throne, a living shield of loyalty. The Emperor still draws breath, however faint. Vorlag stated his voice like grinding stones. "My duty is to him, and him alone. The human's theory is the only one that offers a glimmer of possibility beyond the physician's pronouncement of death. I will not be the one to extinguish that glimmer. He will have his chance." Valerius's eyes narrowed into slits of cold fury. He saw his carefully laid plans for a swift, smooth succession being complicated by a primitive ape-man and a stubborn old soldier. But he knew better than to challenge Vorlag directly. The Praetorian Guard's loyalty was legendary and absolute. "Very well," Valerius hissed. "Let the record show that I advised against this circus. When the human's foolishness proves futile, the delay in the right of succession will fall on your head, Commander." Vorlag simply nodded his attention, returning to Aris. "What do you need, Dr. Kane?" Aris took a steadying breath, the weight of a galactic empire settling squarely on his shoulders. "I need quiet," he said. "And I need you to override the Viridian Med Suite. Tell it to stop trying to regulate his system. The artificial pacing and chemical balances. They're interfering. It's like trying to listen to a whisper in a hurricane. I need you to shut off the storm." Xylos took a sharp step forward. His forearms spread in alarm. "That is madness. If you disengage the life support protocols, his remaining biological functions will cease within moments. His blood oxygenation will plummet. His neural potential will drop to zero. You will kill him. He's already dying, physician." Aris countered his voice, calm but firm. "Your machines are just making it a slow, orderly death. They're drowning out the very connection I'm trying to listen for. We have to take away the artificial support and see if the natural system, the bond between him and the Life Stone, can be coaxed into restarting itself. We have to let him fall and trust that the bond will catch him." It was a terrifying gamble, an act of medical faith that went against every logical protocol. Vorlag stared at the human, then at the Vex, two vastly different philosophies of life and death embodied before him. One offered the certainty of a sterile, dignified end. The other offered a wild, improbable chance, shrouded in mysticism and the unquantifiable power of connection. The old soldier looked at the hand of his emperor, still held firmly in the grasp of the human doctor. He made his choice. "Do it," Vorlag commanded the medical aide. "Disengage the med-suite protocols, all of them." The Cathar aide looked to Valerius for guidance, then to Silos for confirmation. Both were rigid with disapproval, but Vorlag's authority in this specific matter was unassailable. With a trembling claw, the aide tapped a command into the central console. One by one, the life-sustaining hums and clicks of the advanced medical suite died down. The soft pneumatic pressure of the circulatory assistants ceased. The chemical injectors retracted. The rhythmic pulse of the artificial oxygenator faded into nothing. On the main screen, the few remaining life signs that Xylos had dismissed as residual echoes began to plummet. O2 sat 12%, neuropotential SINO2V to core 28.3C. The Emperor was by every technological measure crashing. "You see, you've killed him." Xylos declared, a note of grim triumph in his voice. But Aris didn't look at the monitors. He closed his eyes again, his grip tightening on the Emperor's hand. He ignored the dying machine. He was listening to the ghost. And in the sudden profound silence, he finally heard it clearly. A faint, desperate pulse. A whisper in the dark. "I'm here," Aris whispered back to the being no one else believed was listening. "You're not alone." The silence in the grand chamber was absolute. The only sound was the frantic, panicked breathing of the Cathar aide as he watched the monitors display what was by all rights the final irreversible death of his emperor. Lord Valerius watched with a grim, knowing smirk, his victory momentarily delayed, but now all the more certain. Xylos observed with the detached air of a scientist, watching a failed experiment confirm his hypothesis. Only Aris and Vorlag seemed immune to the panic. The commander stood like a statue of granite, his faith once given unshakable. And Aris was no longer in the room. Holding the Emperor's hand, he had turned inward, focusing his entire consciousness on the fragile, tactile connection. He knew that just holding on wasn't enough. A bridge needs traffic. A connection needs a signal. He had to send something across the void, something to anchor the Emperor's drifting mind. But what signal could a human send that the psyche of a 1,000-year-old alien monarch could possibly understand? He couldn't send data facts or logical arguments. That was the Vex way, and it had failed. He had to send something more fundamental, something intrinsically human. He began to speak, his voice soft, not much louder than a murmur. It wasn't for the benefit of the court. It was for an audience of one, a consciousness lost in the infinite dark. "My name is Aris Kane," he started simply. "I'm a doctor, from a world called Earth. It's a loud, messy, beautiful place. We have oceans, vast, deep bodies of salt water, bigger than anything you can imagine. The waves crash on the shore in a rhythm, a heartbeat, in and out, over and over." He described the color of a sunset over the Pacific. He spoke of the scent of pine needles in a forest after a rainstorm. He talked about the taste of fresh bread, the warmth of a fire on a cold night, the sound of a child's laughter. He wasn't reciting poetry or delivering a speech. He was just sharing. He was sending raw sensory data wrapped in the context of human experience. Xylos scoffed audibly. "He is telling its stories. This is not medicine. This is insanity." But on Aris's datapad, The faint waveform, the one Xylos had dismissed as a neural echo, began to change. The rhythm, which had been erratic and weak, started to stabilize. The amplitude, while still infinitesimal, grew by a fraction of a percentage. It was a statistical anomaly, but it was there. Aris felt it too, a subtle change in the resonance, humming from the life stone. The frantic edge of its despair was softening, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. He pressed on, delving deeper. He moved from simple sensations to more complex emotions. He told the Emperor about his first day of medical school, the terror and the excitement. He described the profound, gut-wrenching grief of losing his first patient, a young girl named Sarah, who had been caught in a shuttle accident. He didn't sanitize the memory. He sent it raw and unfiltered, the pain, the guilt, the feeling of utter failure. He shared the fierce, triumphant joy of delivering a baby, of holding a new, screaming life in his hands. He spoke of love, of the quiet comfort of sitting with his wife Maya, watching the stars from their porch on a clear summer night, their hands intertwined just like this. He sent the memory of her smile, the warmth of her presence. He was building the bridge not out of steel and wire, but out of shared experience. Grief, joy, fear, love, the fundamental universal constants of conscious life. He was showing the Emperor's fading mind that it was not an island, that its experiences were part of a greater whole. He was reminding it what it felt like to be alive, not just to function. The change on the monitors became more pronounced. A new reading flickered to life, one that the Viridian Med Suite hadn't been programmed to prioritize. It was a measure of sympathetic bioharmonic resonance. It had been flat at 0 for the entire procedure. Now it was slowly, painstakingly climbing. "Impossible," Xylos whispered, taking a step closer to the throne. His logical mind was reeling. There was no medical reason for this. The human was not administering any drugs. He was not using any technology. He was simply talking, and the subject was responding. Lord Valerius's smirk had vanished, replaced by a deep, worried frown. A recovering emperor was not in his plans. "This is a trick," he snapped. "Some kind of human psionic ability he has kept hidden. He is a medic, not a telepath." Commander Vorlag growled without taking his eyes off the scene. "Our scans would have detected such capabilities. This is something else." Aris could feel the connection strengthening. It was no longer a one-way transmission. He was beginning to receive something back, faint, fragmented images and emotions not his own. The crushing weight of ruling 1,000 worlds, the loneliness of a leader who could befriend no one, the cold, sterile duty of a life dedicated to the symbol of the throne. He felt the Emperor's weariness, a bone-deep exhaustion that went far beyond the physical. The Emperor wasn't just sick, he was tired of being the unifier, and the lifestone, his constant companion, had mirrored that exhaustion, that desire to simply stop. Aris now understood the core of the problem. Xylos's nanites, for all their sophistication, could not mend a broken will. Life support could not convince a soul to keep fighting. "I know you're tired," Aris whispered, his voice thick with an empathy that was now a two-way street. "I know it's heavy, but you're not done. There are still suns to see, still songs to hear. Maya, my wife, she used to say that the universe is full of stories, and our job is just to be a good audience. Your story isn't over yet." Suddenly the Emperor's hand, the one Oris was holding, twitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, a single muscle contracting, but in the dead-still chamber, it was like a thunderclap. The Cathar aide yelped. Vorlag's breath hitched. Xylos's multifaceted eye widened to its full extent. The life stone on the Emperor's chest, which had been a dull, milky grey, pulsed with a faint internal light, a soft golden glow that lasted for a mere second before fading. On the main monitor, the flat line of the Emperor's heart rate blipped. A single weak but definite spike. Thump! The bridge was holding. Life was crossing it. Aris Kane, with nothing but his hands and his stories, was coaxing an Emperor back from the dead. The single heartbeat echoed in the chamber, a solitary drumbeat against the silence of death. The faint glow from the life stone, though brief, had ignited a dangerous spark in the room hope. The assembled Cathar nobles, who had been preparing to mourn, now stared at the throne with wide, disbelieving eyes. They murmured amongst themselves, their antennae twitching with excitement and confusion. Dr. Aris Kane felt a surge of adrenaline. It was working. The connection was stabilizing. He pushed more of himself across the bridge, not just memories, but feelings of encouragement, of resilience. He projected the stubborn, illogical human refusal to give up the sheer bloody-mindedness that had seen his species claw its way from muddy plains to the stars. Thump, thump, another heartbeat stronger this time. The golden light in the life stone pulsed again, holding its glow for a few seconds longer. The bioharmonic resonance value on the screen climbed steadily. Physician Xylos moved closer, his professional arrogance completely shattered, replaced by a rapt scientific awe. He began rapidly manipulating his own console, not to interfere, but to document. He was witnessing a medical impossibility, a phenomenon that would force the Vex to rewrite 1,000 years of biological doctrine. The sympathetic frequencies are beginning to self-correct, Xylos chimed his voice, filled with a new hesitant respect. The life stone is rebooting its quantum matrix in response to the neurological stimulus. It's treating the human's vocalizations as a viable external biosignature to align with. It thinks his voice is a pacemaker for the soul. But not everyone shared in the burgeoning miracle. For Lord Valerius, this was not a revival. It was a disaster. An emperor returned from the brink would be more powerful, more revered than ever. His own ambitions, so close to being realized, were turning to ash before his very eyes. He had to act. "This is taking too long," Valerius declared, his voice a sharp, commanding crack that broke the spell. "The Emperor is clearly in distress. His system is unstable. This human's primitive ritual is merely inducing spasmodic reactions in a dying corpse. It is a cruel mockery." He turned to the Praetorian guards, who were not Commander Vorlag. "I am invoking my authority as Grand Vizier under the Imperial Emergency Mandate 7. The Observer is compromising the sanctity of the throne. He is a threat to Imperial stability. Detain him. Now." The three guards hesitated, looking from the Vizier to their commander. Vorlag was a legend, but Valerius held the legal authority of the state. It was a direct conflict of orders. "Do not obey him," Vorlag commanded, his voice a low growl. He stepped in front of Valerius, his sheer physical presence a barricade. "My authority regarding the Emperor's physical safety is supreme. Stand down. Your authority ends where my duties as regent in all but name begin." Valerius snarled, his face a mask of rage. "You are relieved of command. Vorlag, I will have you tried for treason." The confrontation, loud and aggressive, sent a shockwave of negative energy through the chamber. Aris felt it instantly through the bond. The nascent curiosity and hope he was receiving from the Emperor's side of the connection were suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of alarm and distress. The Emperor's mind, fragile as it was, recoiled from the conflict. The life stone flickered violently, its golden light turning a sickly, angry red. The rhythmic heartbeats on the monitor became a frantic, arrhythmic tattoo. Thump, 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 thump. No, stop. Aris shouted, his focus breaking. You're killing him. The stress is tearing the bond apart. His warning came too late. The life stone flared with a blinding crimson light, and a high-pitched shriek, both audible and psychic, filled the room. The Emperor's body convulsed on the throne, a violent arching spasm. The numbers on the monitors went haywire, plunging and spiking chaotically. The connection was shattering. The Emperor was being ripped away from him. Aris felt a profound psychic cold as the void rushed back in. He was losing him. All his work, all the hope was being destroyed by petty ambition. In that moment of crisis, Aris Kane made a desperate, instinctive choice. He needed a stronger signal, something that could cut through the noise and chaos, something undeniably powerful. He needed to send not just a story, but a piece of his very soul. He closed his eyes, shutting out the shouting and the chaos. He reached deep inside himself, past the memories of joy and sadness, to the raw foundational core of his being. He found the most painful, most defining moment of his life. The memory of his daughter Lily. She had been 6 years old. A rare, aggressive form of genetic degradation syndrome, something even 25th century medicine had no cure for. He had been a doctor, a healer, and he had been helpless to save his own child. He remembered holding her tiny, frail hand, just as he held the Emperor's now, as she slipped away. The memory was a nexus of unimaginable grief, profound love, and the burning, agonizing fire of helplessness. It was the most human, most vulnerable, and most powerful part of him. He didn't just remember it, he relived it. And he pushed the entire agonizing experience across the bridge. He sent the love, he sent the pain, he sent the failure, he sent the memory of her last faint breath. He sent the truth of what it meant to love something so much that its loss could break you, and the strength it took to survive that breaking. He held nothing back. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. The chaotic crimson light of the life stone was consumed by a brilliant, pure white radiance. It didn't flicker. It shone a steady, powerful beacon that seemed to push the very shadows from the corners of the great chamber. The psychic shriek ceased, replaced by a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. On the monitor, the Emperor's heartbeat, which had been on the verge of stopping, entirely slammed back into a steady, powerful rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. It was the beat of a healthy, living heart. The chaos in the room died instantly. Valerius Vorlagazelos and the guards all stared, mesmerized at the radiant glow emanating from the Emperor's chest. Aris felt a wave of information flood back across the connection, no longer fragmented, but clear and whole. It was the Emperor's consciousness, fully lucid, reaching back to him. It wasn't in words, but in pure understanding. The Emperor had felt Aris's loss. He had felt the love for the child Lily. And in that shared moment of profound vulnerability, the two minds, human and Cathar, truly connected. The Emperor's will to live extinguished by millennia of lonely duty had been rekindled by the fire of a human father's grief. Then a new voice spoke in the chamber. It was weak, raspy from disuse, but it carried an undeniable weight of command that silenced all thought. Enough, Valerius. Slowly, painfully, Emperor Kalen the Unifier lifted his head from the gypsum throne. His eyes, which had been clouded and grey, were now clear, focused, and fixed with burning intensity upon his treacherous Grand Vizier. The Emperor was awake. The awakening of Emperor Kalen was not a sudden dramatic affair. It was a slow, deliberate unfurling of presence, like a star reigniting in the void. His head rose, his posture straightened, and the immense innate authority that had held 1,000 worlds in harmony for a millennium settled back over the chamber. The brilliant white light from the life stone softened to a warm, steady gold, pulsing in time with his strong, rhythmic heartbeat. Lord Valerius froze, his face a canvas of pure terror. The blood drained from his features, leaving his skin a pasty mottled grey. The intricate political calculus that had governed his every move had just been obliterated by a single impossible variable. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. The Emperor's gaze remained locked on him. When he spoke again, his voice was stronger, resonating with the power that was his birthright. You have been a discordant note in a symphony I have long labored to compose, Valerius. I mistook your ambition for diligence. A fatal error, it seems. For me. His eyes flickered for a moment to Aris Kane, and a silent, profound understanding passed between them. Or nearly so. Commander Vorlag, who had stood ready to die for his emperor, now acted with swift, brutal efficiency. He didn't wait for a formal command. He gestured to his loyal Praetorians. Seize the traitor. The guards who had been hesitant before now moved as one, their loyalty snapping back to its true north. They bypassed Valerius's personal retinue, their plasma glaives humming to life their purpose absolute. Valerius the schemer, the master of words and political maneuvering, was cornered. He made a faint, desperate gesture, as if to protest, to explain, but the words died in his throat. He was a creature of shadows, and the sun had just risen. The guards took him by the arms, his fine robes rustling, and dragged him away, his reign of opportunistic grief over, before it had even begun. With the immediate threat neutralized, the chamber fell into a new kind of silence, one of awe and reverence. The Emperor slowly, carefully disengaged his hand from Aris's. The loss of contact felt strange, like an echo fading. Aris felt suddenly light-headed, the emotional and psychic toll of the experience washing over him. He had shared his deepest wound, and in doing so had healed another. Kalen the Unifier looked at his own hand, then at the golden, glowing life-stone on his chest. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first truly voluntary breath he had taken in days. His attention then fell upon the third actor in this drama, high physician Xylos. The Vex surgeon stood rigid, his advanced instruments and nanite controllers hanging uselessly at his sides. He was a monument to the failure of pure, dispassionate logic in the face of life's complexities. High physician. The Emperor said, his voice, not accusatory, but deeply contemplative. Xylos bowed low, a gesture of profound submission and respect that was almost unheard of from a Vex. Your Majesty, my science was insufficient. My diagnosis was in the most fundamental way incorrect. I saw a failing mechanism. I failed to see the living whole. Your science is not wrong, Physician Xylos, the Emperor corrected gently. It is merely incomplete. You understand the composition of the stars, but not the pictures they make in the night sky. You can name every part of a songbird, but you cannot explain its song. Today, you have learned something new. As have I. Xylos straightened his multifaceted eye fixed on Oris. Indeed, Your Majesty. I have witnessed a medical intervention based on principles my people dismissed as primitive folklore. Empathic resonance, narrative therapy, the transmission of will to live as a quantifiable healing agent. Dr. Kane has demonstrated a form of medicine that operates on an axis my science didn't know existed. The Emperor nodded slowly. Finally, his full attention settled on Aris. The human doctor suddenly felt small and out of place again, a simple man in a standard-issue jacket, standing before a living legend. He instinctively took a step back, as if to retreat to the shadows where he belonged. Dr. Aris Kane of Earth. The Emperor said, and the way he spoke the name with a resonance of personal knowledge, of shared intimate experience, made it sound like an honor. You came to my court as an observer, yet you saw more than my advisors, my guards, and the greatest medical mind in the galaxy. Aris found his voice, though it was rough. I saw a pattern, Your Majesty. My training is different. We're used to dealing with systems where the software is as important as the hardware. The software, the Emperor repeated, tasting the unfamiliar word. Apt. You did more than observe a pattern. You reached into the storm of my fading consciousness and offered an anchor. You shared with me a memory of your own profound loss. A child? Lily. Hearing her name spoken aloud by this ancient alien being sent a shiver down Aris's spine. It was a wound he had never shared with anyone, not even his wife, in such raw detail. I felt your grief. The Emperor continued, his voice softening. It was a terrible, beautiful thing, and in it I recognized the echo of my own. The grief of a leader for the people he can never truly know. The sorrow of an emperor who has outlived everyone he ever loved. Your pain reminded me that I was not a symbol, not an institution, but a person, and it reminded my life stone that it was not an organ, but a companion. You did not just restart my heart, Doctor. You reminded me why it should beat. The weight of his words filled the chamber. He had given a name to the inexplicable. Aris hadn't healed him with technology, but with humanity itself. Our capacity for deep, resonant emotion, our ability to connect through shared vulnerability, that was the miracle cure. The Emperor made a gesture with his hand. Commander Vorlog. Majesty, the human delegation. See to it that their status is elevated immediately. They are to be given full diplomatic honors equal to the Vex Concordat, and Dr. Kane's Panasonic Toughpad is to be entered into the Imperial Archives as a medical artifact of the highest importance. Aris blinked, looking down at the scuffed, outdated piece of human tech in his hand. An artifact, and see to it, the Emperor added, his voice regaining its full commanding tone, that a message is sent to the Sol Federation. Inform them that the Cathar Empire wishes to open negotiations for a full technological and cultural exchange, with a particular focus on their unique medical philosophies. This was the true climax, not the saving of one life, but the elevation of an entire species. Humanity, long considered a backwater, chaotic and overly emotional race, was now being invited to the main table, not for its weapons or its starships, but for its heart. The HFY moment wasn't a battle won with guns. It was a galaxy changed by a single compassionate touch. The days that followed were a whirlwind of diplomatic activity. The Imperial Citadel, which had been cloaked in a shroud of impending doom, now buzzed with a renewed and vibrant energy. The news of the Emperor's miraculous recovery spread through the network of 1,000 worlds like a shockwave of light. The official story was discreet, speaking of a sympathetic resonance therapy pioneered by a human medical observer. But the whispers in the corridors of power told a truer, more incredible tale of a human who had talked a god back to life. Lord Valerius was formally stripped of his titles and exiled to a desolate prison moon, his name becoming a byword for treachery. Commander Vorlag was promoted to Lord Marshal of the Imperial Fleets, his unwavering loyalty rewarded with supreme command, and Physician Xylos of the Vex formally requested a sabbatical, not to return to the sterile logic of his homeworld, but to be assigned as a junior observer to the newly established Terran Medical Exchange on Cathar Prime. He was often seen in deep conversation with Aris, his 4 arms gesturing animatedly as he tried to grasp the alien concepts of psychosomatic healing and the clinical application of empathy. He started referring to the human mind not as a chaotic biological processor, but as a neuro-emotional quantum state with therapeutic potential. It was the beginning of a revolution in Vex thought. For Dr. Aris Kane, the experience was surreal. He was no longer an ignored observer, but the most sought-after being in the capital. He was offered titles, estates, wealth beyond imagining. He politely declined them all. He was a doctor, not a diplomat or a nobleman. His place was not in a palace, but where people were hurting. His final meeting with the emperor took place not in the grand chamber of spires, but in a small private observatory at the very peak of the citadel. It was a quiet space, just the 2 of them, and the silent sea of stars beyond the crystalline dome. The emperor was no longer on a throne, but stood beside Aris, looking out at the galaxy. He wore simple robes, and the golden glow of his lifestone was a soft, gentle pulse beneath the fabric. "They are calling you Soul Healer in the outer territories." Kalen said, his voice calm and warm. "A myth is being born around you, Dr. Kane." "I'm no myth, Your Majesty," Aris replied with a small smile. "I'm just a man who knew what it felt like to be lost in the dark." The Emperor nodded, a gesture of deep understanding. "The bridge you built between us, a part of it still remains. I can still feel the echo of your memories, the scent of rain on soil, the face of your wife Maya, the love for your daughter Lily." He paused, turning to face Aris fully. "Her memory saved an empire. I will ensure it is never forgotten. A new stellar nursery has been discovered in the Cygnus Arm. It will be named the Lily Nebula, a place of new life, born from a memory of love." Tears welled in Aris's eyes, hot and unexpected. For the first time in years, the memory of his daughter brought not just pain, but a profound sense of peace and purpose. Her short life, a tragedy on a small, distant world, now had a legacy written in the stars. "Thank you," Aris whispered, the words inadequate but sincere. "It is I who should thank you," Kalen countered. "You have taught my empire a lesson it had forgotten over 100 millennia of technological advancement, that the most powerful force in the universe is not a starship's engine or a physician's nanites. It is connection, empathy, the willingness to reach out and share another's burden." He gestured to the starfield. "Humanity is young, chaotic, and driven by emotions we Cathar have long sought to suppress. We saw it as a weakness. I now see it as your greatest strength. It is the engine of your art, your exploration, your impossible resilience. We have much to learn from you." In that moment, Aris understood the true scope of what had happened. This was more than a diplomatic victory. It was a fundamental shift in the galactic paradigm. Humanity was no longer going to be seen as the boisterous, unpredictable newcomers. They were the keepers of a different kind of power, a wisdom born of messy, painful, beautiful feeling. Aris Kane would eventually return to Earth, not as a hero draped in medals, but as a doctor with a story to tell. He went back to his quiet life, to his wife Maya, to the simple practice of medicine. But the galaxy was forever changed. The Cathar Empire entered an age of renaissance, blending its ancient wisdom with a newfound appreciation for the human element. The Vex began to study the soul with the same rigor they studied the cell. And across the cosmos, a new saying began to take hold whenever a situation seemed hopeless, whenever logic had failed, and the machines had fallen silent. "Find a human, and let them take your hand." In the end, it wasn't humanity's weapons or technology that saved the day. It was our greatest, and often most overlooked superpower, our empathy. Dr. R.S. Kane proved that the ability to listen to connect and to share in another's pain is a force more powerful than any plasma cannon or nanite swarm. He didn't just save an emperor, he showed an entire galaxy that our emotions aren't a weakness to be overcome, but the very core of our strength. The story of the soul healer reminds us that in a universe full of incredible technology and alien wonders, the most profound force of all might just be a simple, compassionate human touch. What do you think is humanity's greatest strength? Is it our empathy, our resilience, our creativity? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into what makes us truly special, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who needs a dose of cosmic hope, and subscribing for more tales of humanity's place among the stars. Your support helps us continue to explore these vast and wonderful what-ifs. Thank you for listening.